There was a case, the Serpico case. You might be too young to know the movie Serpico with Al Pacino. It was about a New York City undercover cop, and he exposes police corruption and gets shot at the end of the movie. It's a really good movie with Al Pacino. He gets shot at the end of the movie and retires from the police force. And he was a real man, Frank Serpico. A woman after the movie, after this was made, decided she wanted to become a single mother and tricked him into fathering a child. And the court accepted that because she told her friends she was going to trick him, and they testified, and the court said, yes, you were tricked into it, and still awarded her over 90% of his police pension. So everything that he goes through in this movie to including getting shot to earn his pension, she won by sleeping with him one night. And when this became a legal issue, I remember I think she was the president of the New York chapter of NOW, because this case was in New York, so they went to her for a quote, and she said, if he didn't want to be a parent, he shouldn't have sex. Which is exactly the pro-life argument. If you say that so what do we need abortion for? If you don't want to be a parent, don't have sex. Well, that option that's not a good alternative for women, but for men, that's perfectly okay. And all the arguments against men having the same kind of choices are just rewordings of the pro-life movement. And all the arguments against joint custody are just rewordings of the arguments that we use to keep women from careers.
So what do you think the solution is for male reproductive rights?
You have to, again, then we have to have this discussion, what's best for people. And personally, I am pro-choice. Personally, I feel that the whole argument for a paternity suit is that, hey, you got her pregnant, it's not fair to leave her stuck with the problem. And that argument has been outdated ever since Roe v. Wade, because you didn't leave her stuck with the argument. You left her with a choice, a decision. And if she makes the decision, I don't care what your views are on this, I want to have a child. If she has that power to say, I want to be a parent, then she needs to take the responsibility of taking care of it. She can't stick somebody else. She can't, we can't say it's too much of a burden for a woman to have 9 months of parenthood and then give the child up for adoption. She should be able to get out of it even before 9 months, but a man should be stuck for 18 years and have, no control over it. He should be able to, and this is, privately, a lot of feminists agree with this logic, but publicly they're just getting too much traction with it. But there are some feminists who did. Karen DeCrow, who was a national president of the National Organization for Women, became Serpico's attorney. So there are people who recognize that there are people who feel egalitarianism is a principle and feminism is a principle, but most of the feminist leaders do not really subscribe to the principle. They use the principle as part of an argument, but they'll rationalize their way out of it, at a moment's notice. And when I look at the political landscape, I really think the most sexist entity in the political spectrum are feminist leaders. They're the most blatantly sexist of any of the leaders. They're the ones who are saying we should allocate healthcare according, the healthcare dollars according to gender, as long as women get more of it. We should have health agencies, just for women, but not for men. We should vote. You should consider gender when you vote for a candidate, as long as you're voting for a woman. But don't vote against a woman. That would be sexist. If don't vote for a man because he's a man, but you can vote for a woman because she's a woman. They're so blatant about it.
I guess the argument, I'm trying to think of what would be the argument against it, and I guess the argument against it would be saying that, well, women have suffered for so many years that they're trying to catch up, basically. So what would you say to that?
That it's not true, because we've been left out of that discussion, that men have also suffered for many. We have a long list of issues that would be the number one priority of the equal rights movement if they affected women as directly as they affected men. One of them that we're now talking about is abortion, the total lack of choice that men have. We have far fewer choices than women had even before abortion was legalized. Another one was the draft that I mentioned. Healthcare is another one. If the male life if women died 7 years before or 6 years, whatever it is now, before men instead of 6 years after men, that would be the number one health issue of our time. That would be on the news every night. Gender genocide would be in the news every night. But as it is, if you Google low male life expectancy, I haven't done this lately, but I'm sure if you did it from, say, the period of 1970 to 2005 anyway, I bet 95% of the time you read the article of whatever comes up, and it's about how the low male life expectancy hurts women. The poverty rate for widows, there aren't enough eligible men, elderly women are lonely because there aren't enough men around. Things like that. We can't even die and get credit for having a problem.
Oh, that's funny. That's fascinating. But it's so true. I mean,
it's like dying is one more thing men do to make life tough on women. It's a male conspiracy.
Seriously, you guys need to get it together so women don't suffer so much. So I want to go back to the draft because I've brought this topic up to a couple people while talking about this documentary, and they were like, "Oh, men's rights. What do they need rights for?" And so there were a list of things that I found really fascinating, like the male reproductive rights that they virtually don't really have any. And then the draft, and whenever I bring up the draft, people say, well, that's not in effect anymore. The draft isn't around anymore. And then I say, but still, at 18 years old, men have to register for the draft. What would you say to that argument that, well, the draft doesn't really count anymore because it's not around?
Okay, well, one thing is that even if the president, using that example, said we might need more daycare centers and preschools, and so just in case, I want all women to register their bodies for that would be horrendous. And it's signing over control. When you register for the draft, you sign over sovereignty over your body. I taught a course. I was telling you before about I had no game plan when I started this, and so one of the things I did was teach probably the first college level course on men's issues at Tufts University. And those are smart students. Tufts is a good school. And I did it really because there was research I needed done. I figured I'll sign it, have a class full of free researchers. And it worked out to be good because then suddenly I became, a visiting lecturer at Tufts University that added more credibility to what I was saying. And I didn't even think about that. I just wanted some research done. But I started out one of the classes by saying, I don't understand this fuss that women are making about rape. I mean, it's over so fast. I know women who, fantasize about it. And, what's the big deal? And people gave me all the those arguments against the ridiculous thing that I just said, and they were talking about how, but you lose control over your body. You're forced to do things against your will. You're afraid. You think you might die even if you don't. They just went on and on with all the things, and I said, okay. Today's class is actually not about rape. Today's class is about the draft. Everything you said about rape is what the draft is. It's what it does to your body. The government decides what your body will do, what your body will wear, and where it's going to do it. Your body, if the government decides it can send you into danger, it can have you killed, you can be scared, and traumatized for the rest of your life. The government decides all of these things, and you have no control over it.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point.
And when feminism started, the draft was very, very real. The Vietnam War was going on. Men were being drafted, So 18-year-old women were protesting the streets, talking about, the lack of decision over themselves, lack of control over my body, myself, and men can do anything. And their peers were being forced into Vietnam to fight for their lives.
So do you... quickly, could you kind of... So I want to bring something up that's a little bit tangent from what we've been talking about, so I do want to come back to what we've been talking about, but this just came to mind and I wanted to see your take on this. So are you ready to go ahead? Okay. So all these arguments not arguments, but all these men's issues that you bring up that are really important, that people should be passing better legislation for, and all these things, they're all, valid arguments that are underreported in the media, these men's issues, and the progress that feminism has made. You said you're pro-choice. I mean, it's great progress for women. So you're not necessarily putting down women and feminism and what they've done for women. You're just saying that there's another side to the coin. Is that what you're saying, or do you think that feminism has made bad progress?
It has made a lot of mistakes. There are a lot of policies that are mistaken, and it's also been fighting against, not just being silent about men's issues, but fighting against them. Like joint custody, they're lobbying vigorously against it when they should be. Karen DeCrow, the former president of NOW that I mentioned, she said, we should be jamming it down men's throats. We shouldn't be fighting against it, because women will never compete as equals with men on the job market as long as they have the extra burden of childcare. They need to share it. And the men's rights, all of the men's rights people that I know of are supportive of women's issues. One of the big, I'm going to get back to this in a second, one of the major differences between what I would call egalitarianism and what feminism is doing is that feminists look at men and women as basically competitors. We're basically opposites. We feel powerless, so you must feel powerful. If we help you, you're hurting us. We have to catch up, as the way you put it. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. I think the basic relationship between men and women is not one of competition, it's one of interdependence. And so by opposing work on men's issues, there's no way women will, we have to do this together. And men's rights people that I know of understand that. So even if women didn't want equal pay, for example, we would be insisting on it. We don't want that extra burden. We recognize that's an extra burden for us. If you and I are in a relationship and you can only make 77% of what I can make, then it makes sense when we have children, it makes sense for you to stay home and for me to work twice as many hours. That's not the option that I want. I want to be able to have the option of saying, well, let's both, share this joy of raising children. And then if the relationship breaks down, you get custody. Now I have two households to support because of this so-called advantage. So we don't see that as an advantage. But feminism, too much, when Ms. Magazine had an article, I remember, about joint custody and why women should oppose it. And what they said was that children are a bargaining chip, was the phrase they use, in a divorce for a better financial settlement. They don't see that. We're in this together. We need for feminism, by putting down men's issues and trying to work towards equality. It's like nailing your right foot to the ground and then trying to walk to the other side of the room. You can't. You have to walk together. You can't do it.
It's a very good point. I never really thought about it like that. That men want women to succeed. So because if you're in a relationship, you're together in it. You're a team. Mm-hmm. I guess feminists would say that. Well, what would they say?
And that's why some of the statistics really on unequal pay are not really. If you want to measure someone's standard of living, you don't measure what they earn, you measure what they consume. And because men and women are in relationships, women's rate of consumption equals or surpasses men's rate of consumption. If you look at healthcare dollars, at entertainment, at personal products, at if you're not making any money and we're still living in the same house, it's not like black-white relation. You know, if the average white is earning more than the average black, that does say something a lot more direct about what a black standard of living is, but not for men and women. We're in this together. And that's why when I was talking about the rewards that women get from raising children, it's if we're in a marriage, you're getting the same financial reward, and I want that option.
I guess one of yeah, go ahead.
I just thought of something. Because I mentioned affirmative action before, and one of the ways that I like to challenge people with whether they believe in a principle or not, do you really believe in the principle of affirmative action, is I'll say raising children is a legitimate work, isn't it? It's not only legitimate and important. I mean, the women who are staying home raising, they're not deadbeats, are they? They're performing, yeah, that's legitimate work. There is a documented history of discrimination against men in this work, right? Because the custody, we used to have the tender years doctrine. Mothers would automatically get custody unless they were proven unfit. That's documented history, yeah. Statistically, this still persists, right? Women are still getting custody 85, 90% of the time, yeah. Okay, those are the three things you need to kick in an affirmative action program. We have a career. We have a documented history of discrimination, and statistically the pattern persists. Are you prepared to take affirmative action to increase the number of men raising children? Are you prepared to tell judges, to favor fathers until things equal out? And don't say, I can't find enough fathers who are qualified. You have to train them the way affirmative action works. And 95% of the people who say they're in favor of affirmative action suddenly say, well, no, this is not here. This is too important. Oh, more important than like brain surgery, where we have affirmative action to get women in those schools. More important, it's most people really do not subscribe to the principles. Most of the people who are calling themselves feminists and calling the shots are really have another agenda that's not equality, and that's the problem. That's why we haven't really solved it. There are a lot of feminists like Karen DeCrow who do believe in the principle, but there are too many who don't, and they're in position of power.